Hi, everyone. First of all, thanks so much for joining me today. I have received a few questions on the app, and I'm happy to take those questions at the end of the talk and any other questions that people have, so please do, ask questions at the end. I'd like to start by a little bit of context as to who I am. I'm Jessie Auguste. I am a software engineer at CyberSafe. I have a psychology degree. I studied psychology before I became a software engineer. And I'd like to kind of give that context to why I think psychological safety is an incredibly important thing for engineering teams and how we can all work to make more psychologically safe places to work. So the things we'll be covering today will be what psychological safety actually is, what it means behind the buzzword, what the key components are of building a psychologically safe team, and how we all benefit as engineers and in tech teams, and the practical ways, hopefully some things you can take away to your teams after this conference. So psychological safety, to begin with, is the idea of prioritizing psychological safety is something that's incredibly important because it improves retention. It means that people have faster and better professional development, and it leads to generally building more innovative and kind of well thought out products. So what is it, and how do we cultivate more of that? I really love this quote, which is from the Beyond Self-Care and Bubble Baths, a vision for community care, which says that we need to destigmatize burdening others, we need to normalize asking for help, and we need to challenge ableism. And I think this sentence is a really good way to capture kind of the essence of what it is to have a safe team and somewhere that we feel that we're able to ask for help and we're able to be ourselves as well. So what is psychological safety? Apologies if the writing is too small for the screen. It's essentially the ability to show up and employ oneself as without the fear of having the negative consequences of showing up as yourself. So there's no consequences to your self-image, your status, or your career if you're psychologically safe. And it can be defined as a shared belief as well that the team is safe for interpersonal risk-taking. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a practical sense. So what it looks like when we don't have psychological safety is that we have communication breakdowns. There are frictions within and between teams, and we have low morale. We see there's a high employee turnover. People don't feel like they belong. This isn't a place people feel like they can contribute, and ultimately you have the performance and the productivity of your teams impacted when you're not psychologically safe. And so a really key component when we think about psychological safety and having a place that people feel welcome and they feel that they can belong is that there is the consideration of not just belonging, but also inclusion. And so part of what belonging and inclusion is feeling accepted and respected. So where there is psychological safety in teams, we feel that we're able to take risks, we can admit our mistakes, which is incredibly important, and we can share ideas, experiment, discuss conflicts, and ask for feedback. And these are all things that mean we can have a high-performing team where people feel they are contributing to something bigger than themselves. And so one of the things that's really important when we're thinking about engineering and ways that we can have tech teams feel psychologically safe is to make failing safe. And I'm a big fan of the kind of rise of DevOps and the DevOps processes, which mean that we're making it harder for failure to impact production, and we're implementing strategies which mean that we're not only are we taking the blame away from the individuals, but we're allowing these kind of systems to be in place that will catch things if there are errors that do happen. And so by doing this, and it's easier said than done, it means that we're able to have the possibility of reframing any failure that does happen into something that can further strengthen the systems that we have in place. And we'll be talking about some practical examples that we can do with that. And then also another key component of a psychologically safe environment is having a learning from failure attitude. So even when those inevitable issues do happen, production is taken down, something terrible goes wrong, there's a security issue, a psychologically safe environment means that it's fostering a learning from failure attitude. There's not any one person that is the cause of this fault, and we are open to communicating what happened, looking towards these failures as an opportunity for further development, and we're finding ways that we can allow this failure to have a positive impact on the things we're building moving forward. And something I really want to emphasize here is that doesn't necessarily mean that we're failing all the time and that's okay, and we're not kind of conscious of improving and strengthening our systems. It's just saying that it's not down to an individual. It's something we can look to as a way to further improve, and we're looking for ways to grow as a team. And so another thing that I think is really important is having the opportunity of when these things go wrong to show empathy. And something that we all have an innate need of as human beings is to feel community care. So sharing burdens between people and having people within your team that you feel you can confide in, and doing that together rather than allowing that issue to be down to any one individual, means that you can help people to manage their stress better. You're going to see that people feel more able to admit mistakes, more able to learn from the mistakes that are being made, and are just generally less stressed at work when they feel that that's something they can share, rather than having to completely keep it all to themselves and shoulder all of that burden. And a great example of this is the DevOps HugOps movement, which I absolutely love. And so if you haven't heard of it and you haven't seen it, it's when a service goes down and we all send HugOps to the engineers at that service, knowing that they're going to be going through a tough time. And it's a screenshot. We had GitHub go down a couple of days ago, and Monica is sending HugOps to the engineers at GitHub. So another great benefit of making sure that you're prioritizing psychological safety and making sure that you're able to kind of ensure that people are doing their best and being their best selves is being able to foster innovation in a way that allows for experimentation. So often we try to employ kind of agile methodologies and try and think about ways that we can iterate quickly on something, but one of the things that can be really difficult to translate into practical everyday development is this part of agile, which means that you kind of give up on something or leave something alone once you've discovered that it isn't working too well. So I think one of the really important parts of fostering innovation is being honest about whether something is being successful or not very early on, and minimizing the bad feelings that can occur if something isn't going well. If we really want to be innovative and have an innovative product and be involved in like fast-moving tech, we also need to be able to move on quickly. And so quite often, if we have a psychologically safe team, that means that there's a catalyst for experimentation, because we all feel like we can try something, it doesn't work, not the end of the world, we move on. And so, yeah, that's a key part as well in building psychologically safe teams. So we've set the context, we've got a few ideas of the things that it can mean and the ways that we can implement it, but what are some practical examples that you can employ in your teams? So the first thing I want to touch on is having a know-it-all versus learn-it-all culture. And I think that it can be really easy when we become a little bit more knowledgeable and we're becoming more senior as engineers, that it can be easy to fall into the trap of wanting to impress everybody and not allowing the space to admit when you don't know something. So in a know-it-all culture, you might have people who are showing off that they know all the facts and the theories, but they're not always testing the truth behind those things. They're not always experimenting and, I guess, being willing to accept that their point of view might not necessarily be right. And we've all had those technical discussions where it can be incredibly difficult to convince somebody of an alternative perspective because they're so set in their views. And that's very different to a learn-it-all culture where we have people who are testing what they know constantly. They're not afraid to admit they're wrong. They're not afraid to put their hand up in a meeting and say, I don't actually understand why this route is better. And so I think if we are really prioritizing having a psychologically safe team, we're making sure that everybody feels comfortable to learn, and that includes seniors too. So again, we touched on failure a little bit ago, but I think, again, it's really important to stress having failures as an opportunity to reinforce a good culture. And so we spoke about having a blameless culture. Once you have the opportunity to experiment and you're doing innovative things, mistakes will happen. And what is really important is, again, we're coming to the system being at fault as opposed to the individual. So I have a colleague in the audience today who we had a hack day very recently, and one of us managed to, and it wasn't him, managed to take down production on the hack day. And rather than it being an issue that that person is, needs to be ostracized and needs to be told off, or there needs to be a kind of, I guess, strengthening of what we can and can't do as part of our really important experimentation days, we instead had the opportunity to discuss what was the system that allowed this to happen, how do we make sure that it's stronger in the case that this thing happens again, and what can we do to make it even safer to release into production in a really quick hack day circumstance. And so the person who took down production that day saw an opportunity for them to lead that situation to improve that system after that, and that gave a better chance at making sure that the experimentation can continue to happen, and that person now isn't going to stop experimenting because they made that mistake. They now have a system in place that would stop that from having such a disastrous impact were it to happen again. And then as well, for a learn it all culture, you need to be able to see all the engineers within your team learning. So encourage a culture of knowledge sharing. Another thing that we do really well is having a space for people to share things that they're learning in Slack. So we've got an Engineering Today I Learned channel, and that's a place where anybody can go, put in something. It could be like a shortcut they've learned, or a library that they're using, or a change they've made to their IDE that makes it better. But it's a place where we can see juniors are able to see that seniors are still learning. And I think it's about reinforcing that culture and understanding that it doesn't matter if you've been in it for 10 years, 2 years, 5 years, everybody's learning every day, and we're all trying to kind of pass that knowledge on in every opportunity possible. And seeing senior people discover new things is a way for a junior as well to learn how to learn that thing too, and making sure that you're reinforcing that view that you can't know absolutely everything. And another thing with seniors and being able to share their knowledge is that having that internal channel and having that place can mean that they have an opportunity to do so in a setting that's less intimidating. Quite often I speak to engineering teams where there are senior engineers who really enjoy getting on with their work and getting into that deep focus mode. They don't necessarily want to be so hands-on in the one-to-one coaching, and so allowing that kind of asynchronous sharing of knowledge is a great way to encourage that type of learner to be able to contribute to the learning culture. And that doesn't just have to be in short messages, that can be producing documentation and finding ways that they can disseminate the things that they are learning in a way that's accessible to other engineers. And then I think another challenge we come across as teams grow and teams scale is that it can be difficult to have all the seniors teach all the new juniors all the time. And it can be quite a resource-intensive exercise to coach people. So something that we've seen work really well in scaling technical coaching is having regular office hours across the different chapters within our organization. So we've got a back-end office hours that happens twice or 3 times a week, and it rotates across different senior engineers who can choose as part of the rota to be on that office hours. And it means that any of the juniors can turn up to that session, whether they have a problem or not, and they can pair with that senior and share what they're learning. And the people who are joining that session just to kind of absorb that knowledge can be there too, not necessarily with a problem, but just having that space means that you're not going to have a junior sat at home or in the office worrying about, I don't really know if I can bother this person about this thing, because they have that 2 o'clock on a Wednesday that they can go to the office hours and figure that out together with somebody else. And then also, I think we need to give juniors more opportunity to share too. So something that we've recently implemented is a technical show and tell, which happens, I think, on a bi-weekly basis. And it gives the opportunity for people who might not necessarily be very deep in the kind of internal knowledge yet. It gives them the opportunity to share things that they are enjoying. So they are tech topics. It could be a library that they're using on side projects. It could be a side project itself. We had our CTO do a tech talk on his smart home setup. But really what it is it's another place to safely practice that learning and that dissemination of knowledge. It's not a high-stakes environment. They're not presenting a project which needs to impress stakeholders. They're sharing something with their colleagues that they work with every day, and they're getting the opportunity to practice public speaking, to practice the sharing technical knowledge, and it reinforces that message again that we can all learn from each other. And then another thing is about fostering belonging. So if we really want to be truly safe and a place that people want to show up every day, they need to feel included. And inclusivity means considering the needs of people that are different to you. So we think of parents, introverts, remote workers, non-drinkers. How do we make them feel like they belong? How do we make them feel included in the things that we are planning for them within our organization? And this shouldn't just be within the workload itself. It's about the ways that we can consider them in how we are getting to know each other as a team, how we're building teams. And so, yeah, a couple of things for that. We have the kind of traditional work culture, which can imply late nights, heavy drinking, social situations. And I absolutely don't think we should say no to those at all. But we should consider the people that are not able to make those things, who have external family commitments, who are a little bit shy, don't do well in loud social situations. What can we do that's suitable for them, and how do we make them feel included? And so one of the things that we did in Christmas last year, we did a Raspberry Pi Advent Calendar kit, and we sent all the engineers one of these Advent Calendar kits, and every day was a different part to build. And we were giving each other async updates in a specific channel. We had meetings and retros to discuss the parts we liked. By the end, you were building an entire little box, a little smart kit that enabled you to write Christmas songs and do Christmas lights. And what it meant was that it allowed the people who were slightly more introverted, the people who were remote as well, as a remote-first company, who weren't able to make it to the in-person Christmas socials, an opportunity to do something where they could socialize with their team and get to know them and feel included. And then another thing I think which is really important, we go back to the idea of experimentation and innovation. We have a regular monthly hack day, which we take very seriously. We encourage absolutely everybody within the business to take part, and the key thing is that it doesn't have to be a working thing, but you need to commit to something at the beginning of the day and update, whether that's async or in a meeting at the end of the day. Super simple. It's really easy to kind of let it fall by the wayside and not necessarily keep up with, but I think that the impact that having something in our calendar that is kind of like almost immutable within our culture allows people to have that opportunity to experiment, and there's no pressure on expectations to have something built, but it's kind of like a safe place to be able to play around with ideas, and having it kind of structured as part of our monthly cadence means that we are showing that it's an important thing to do, and it is part of our culture, and it's part of how we learn and how we develop. So many of our Hack Day projects end up in production and have been are now successful features, but if we hadn't have had that space to play around and we haven't had those first few attempts that didn't go very well, they might not have made it. So I definitely think that Hack Days and the opportunity for experimentation should be baked in. And then next is celebrating success. So one of the things that we can overlook is we have retros for things that go well or don't go well. We have postmortems. We have situations where we need to discuss something that's been a failure, but very rarely do we have the opportunity to discuss when something has gone well. And I think that it's incredibly important not only to give recognition to the people that are contributing to these projects, but just so if you have multiple teams, you have the opportunity for people to learn from what's going well as well. So some examples of things that we've done in the past is have celebrations for reaching a certain level of test coverage, resolving a security issue, or doing particularly well on a pen test as compared to a previous one. And then another thing as well is making sure that you're making your learning social. So we mentioned the Slack channels, but there's also the opportunity for informal conversation and having people share in kind of agile rituals, like whether it's stand-ups or other situations that encourage people to have independent research kind of as a conversation point within the context of work. So if I think of an example, we have opportunities for people to share cybersecurity news. It's not necessarily something that everybody is an expert in as we're a cyber company, but it's something that we allow people to kind of, engage in and share in a social way to learn. And one of the final things I want to talk about is feedback. And feedback is an incredibly important part of feeling psychologically safe. We need people to be able to be honest and share if something isn't going well. And we need people to be able to understand and express their full selves if something is working too. So we need to make sure that we've got as many opportunities for feedback within our engineering teams as possible. And one of those examples that I think can be helpful is an employee net promoter score. So it's the question where you get asked, would you encourage or would you, how likely are you to recommend this as a place to work for other people? And there are some benefits and some downsides. Of course, it's a number that doesn't tell you much all the time, but what it is that it's quick, it's repeatable, and it's really easy to track over time. You might also see things that you don't see otherwise just because of the nature of it being anonymous. And so having that as something that you're seeing change over time, you can kind of see the impact of decisions that you're making and see how teams and individuals within those teams are affected by certain milestones within a company. And then I think another thing which is really important that sometimes can be frowned upon because it kind of can circumvent levels of hierarchy is skip-level meetings. So it's the meeting where rather than having it with your manager, you have it with your manager's manager. And what that means is without the supervision of your manager and having that opportunity to speak to somebody in a higher level of leadership, there might be some things that you might feel more comfortable sharing, or there might be some things that your manager might not have thought important to pass on that you then have the opportunity to pass on. And I think having that baked into the culture of an engineering team is super important, because then that way it's not you circumventing, there's no hierarchy issue. It's something that just happens and is natural and part of the process, and people are much more likely to share those things that they might otherwise not feel very comfortable doing. And then another form of feedback is collaborative team feedback. So having that in a retro and having, I recently learned about a cultural post-mortem, which is when there's a kind of cultural issue happening within an engineering team and you have a post-mortem or a retro specific to that. And that's an incredible, powerful thing, because these tend to be a much more solutions-focused. If they're run right, you can have the opportunity for people to bounce ideas off each other and kind of, again, be a little bit experimental in the solutions that they're suggesting. You're not necessarily going to have everybody speak up and be the most vocal, but that's okay, because hopefully you'll be able to have those in other forms of feedback. But really having the chance to speak as a team and collaborate is a really important part and a really important channel for collecting feedback. And then finally, there is having a regular one-to-one with your manager. This should be a staple part of anybody's role as an engineer in any team, but I don't think it can be overstated how important this is. This is the person that is directly responsible for a lot of your career progression. They are a person that you will be able to celebrate with and also commiserate with when projects don't go well. This should be something that is regular and respected as a regular thing that occurs in your calendar. And this regular cadence is what allows people to build trust. And if you don't have that trust, you won't have the opportunity for people to speak up early. It's also great for the people who are a little bit more introverted that might not feel like they can contribute or discuss these things when they are in a group setting. And so really a line manager's job should be to be able to find out how those things are going for that individual. And then to summarize, I think that psychological safety is an incredibly important thing for an engineering team to do well. If you have a psychologically safe team, you will have people who are expressing their views wholeheartedly. They are bringing their full self to work. They are sure that they can make mistakes and still have a job the next day and still feel comfortable working with their colleagues. There isn't that fear of punishment because they are encouraged to make mistakes, and there's going to be a lot more collaboration, more problem solving, and a lot more innovation. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. I'm now going to take questions.
Hello, my name is Esther. Thank you for the talk. I was wondering if I could hear your opinion on expressing personal emotional states, mental states during daily stand-ups, for instance. We were at odds in what to use it for. I wanted to pitch this, but I did not know if that would be overburdening people, like being too intrusive. What is your thoughts on that?
So sorry, just to clarify, do you mean to ask people about their mental states or encourage them to share?
Encourage them to share.
Yeah, okay. I think it's a really nice thing to do. Like, I don't think it should be, as long as it's not a mandated and expected thing to do, I think it's a really great thing. We do something at work where we've got like the battery low emoji on Slack, and if we're having a low mental health day or we're low on battery, we put that there, and that kind of lets people know outside of our teams as well, like, hey, I'm not doing so well today. I'd like to have the opportunity to not have an impromptu one-to-one or join in a huddle. So I think, yeah, having that space where you can share those things is a lovely thing, and I think has worked really well for us. Thanks. I had a few questions on the app, which was, as managers, could we manage the mental health of our teams? So it's a really tricky one because there's definitely like a boundary that should exist, and there's like at a certain point it does become a health issue that people should be concerned with. So I think it's our job as managers to look out for those signs, and definitely something that we should be actively speaking to people about. But I don't think it's our responsibility to ensure that everybody is mentally well all the time. Like, that's an impossible standard that we could set ourselves that could make us unwell. So definitely, I do think we have a responsibility to look out for people, but there's a point where that's something that that should be passed on to like more qualified individuals. And hopefully there is the opportunity to have some kind of mental health support, mental health first aiders within an organization.
Quick question, if I may. So very quickly, about one-on-ones.
Yes.
So you mentioned regular one-on-ones. That's something I would like to change, for example. I would like to foster ping me whenever you want. Because something like regular, it seems like going to church to confess. You know? So for 2 weeks you have to keep everything inside you, and things might get ruined into those 2 weeks, so you have to act before. So have you tried this approach with non-regular one-on-ones?
Not with no regular one-on-ones at all, but I think somewhere both of those things together is great. Like, if you want to chat before the next one, then please do. I'm definitely someone that can forget what's happened in the last 2 weeks the moment it comes to that catch-up, so I understand the need for that. I love the idea of, just ping me whenever, but I think there should still be that opportunity, because you've got to account for the people that are so shy that they might not, even despite you doing everything you can do to make them feel comfortable, they won't proactively come to you. So you still want to have those check-ins just in case for those people. But I do I love the idea of making sure people can come to you at any point. Yeah, thanks. I had another one, which was, do hack days have ranking and prizes, or is it a normal, no pressure, no competition occasion to experiment and innovate? So there's definitely like gamification and competition within our teams, right? Like, people are always trying to, there's like a friendly level of competition, but I don't think it requires any kind of specific prizes or anything like that. I think just the nature of, you've got that time challenge and you've got till the end of the day to make something ready to show the company. I think that's enough of a prize in itself. I know that there have been occasions where people have also felt intimidated by the competitive nature. So again, it's a really tough balance. You want it to be entry level so that anybody can participate, but also rewarding enough that people really want to do their best. And I think that's something that you're always going to be trying to strike that balance between those two things.
I think that wouldn't also excessive gamification, excessive gratification through a prize or something divert from the actual intention of the day?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You could do that because, again, another thing that is really important is we also want you to show when something hasn't worked, and people might not want to show their failure at the end of the day if they're doing it for the incentivized prize. So yeah, no, that's a really good point. I think sometimes it's just, yeah, I don't think it's necessary because you could take away from the intrinsic nature of what motivates you to do well there. Yeah, thank you. I had someone else ask how to encourage people communicating besides work. And I don't know if you're here, but if you, yeah, I'd love clarification on what you mean by that one. No. Okay.
It's me again. I would, on that, I would be interested in your comment on how non-topical discussions could be fostered in the sense of like small talk, in the sense of like fostering a belonging beyond the task, so that I actually talk with my friends from Android without actually working with them.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I think it's different depending on whether you're remote and not. And I think in a remote setting, it's a much tougher one to try and figure out the answer to. I think something that we do quite well is like having external events, like online events that we attend together, finding the opportunity to have those social occasions that you can kind of collaborate with and meet people with outside of work. But yeah, it's a really tricky one. I don't know if anybody else has any suggestions for how you would encourage communication outside of work, socialization outside of work. Yeah.
Last chance.
Cool. Thank you.